Welcome to Localite, everyone. Thanks so much for joining us. You know, today we're discussing some of the history of the Columbia Gorge. I mean, we all live here and love it, and many of us don't really realize all of the history that exists here and how the places in the Columbia Gorge got here. So we have Dan Spatz on the show today to talk about that, and he's a local authority on the history of the Columbia Gorge, although he wouldn't say he's an authority, although I think compared to myself, he's definitely an authority. So we're going to talk with him, and he's also he's a board member of the Columbia Gorge Discovery Center, as well as the vice chair of the Wasco County Historical Society. And I had to look at my notes on that because that's a mouthful. So Dan, after that, welcome.
Thank you, John, very much.
Yeah.
It's a pleasure to be here.
Well, thank you. We appreciate it. It's great to have you on. So let's start way back when the settlers were coming in and who they were and where they were from and all of that. Tell us.
Let's talk about the first settlers of all, the Native Americans. They were here long before the Oregon Trail immigrants, and when the immigrants arrived, those were the folks that they encountered. There were some major tribes, a variety of major tribes, living here in the Columbia Gorge. The Dalles was a meeting place for those tribes. There was a language, kind of a language family called Sahaptin, which was spoken from the Dalles east, going over into toward Idaho. And then there was a number of other tribes in this direction going down to the Pacific Ocean. Those were the original settlers.
Okay.
And they were here for who knows how long. But when the first explorers came here, those were the people they encountered. The European explorers, and there were four major nations involved. Russia coming in from the Bering Sea. Spain, of course, had an early foothold in Mexico and California and was looking to extend its influence up north. England, of course, and then the upstart, the United States, America. Some of these explorations were taking place right around the year of American independence. And in fact, the first real discovery was focusing on the Columbia River. We had heard our ancestors had heard for years and years of something called the Northwest Passage. This was a fabled sea level passage that extended from the Atlantic to the Pacific Ocean, connecting those two. Of course, the Panama Canal was not in existence, not until the 20th century. So how in the world do you make that easy passage? Well, they'd been looking for it, there were rumors. And so the explorers were seeking that passage as they went along the northern coast of Oregon and Washington State. Navigation left much to be desired in those days, and so they found suspicious areas at Puget Sound and another one where this massive river was reaching the Pacific Ocean. They weren't sure, could either of those have been this fabled Northwest Passage? So that was a focus point of those explorations.
Okay.
There was a Spanish captain named Bruno Hesida, who in 1775 discovered an upwelling of fresh water coming off into the Pacific Ocean and thought it might be that place. In fact, he named it. He gave it a name, the Rio San Roque, in 1775. And
Rio San
Roque. And I was doing a little bit of internet research. I do not speak Spanish. I think it might mean rock or rook, as in chess. But the river of the castle, perhaps some sort of a natural formation that he was referring to. But that was the initial discovery. It did not last, though. It did not go down in history as the discovery of the Columbia River. There were another Englishman, a Captain Mears. His name is captured on Cape Mears on the Oregon coast.
I was going to say, I've been out to Cape Mears, and I wondered if that was the
one.
Correlation. Okay.
You've probably been to Hecate Head, also
Yes.
on the Oregon coast. Hecate.
Yes.
His name lived on. Captain Mears was English, and the English and the Spanish did not get along very well, and Captain Mears went to the same location and said, nah, there's no river there. Forget about it. No Northwest Passage. So another Englishman came along, George Vancouver, exploring that same stretch of coast. This was in 1792, and he, of course, seconded his countryman, Mears, and said, well, he was right. There's no Northwest Passage. There's nothing to explore, no big river there. And then he encountered the American, Captain Robert Gray, that same year. Robert Gray was hot on the tail of that river. He thought that he had found it. And Vancouver, again, being a stubborn Englishman, I'm sorry, I'm Irish, said, forget it, there's no river there. Well, Gray proved him wrong. Gray went ahead and entered the Columbia River in May of 1792. He traveled up the Columbia River for about 12 miles, came back, and he told Vancouver about it. Vancouver, representing Great Britain, was not happy. He sent his own Lieutenant Broughton up the river at that point. He got as far as Washougal, came back down again. They were discovering and finding Native Americans all along the way. That was the initial discovery of the Columbia River, 1792, and that led to all of the things that have occurred since then.
Okay.
It's been a remarkable story.
Okay.
So, continuing from there.
Yeah.
Okay. Let's talk about history, remnants of history that we see today, and I'd like to kind of weave that in to the discussion, if I may.
Absolutely.
Now, it's going to be hard to find remnants of 17th, 18th century exploratory cruises, but we do have a replica called the Lady Washington that's based in Grays Harbor on the Washington coast.
And that's a ship.
That is a replica of one of the two ships that Captain Gray had on his voyage. His main vessel was called the Columbia Rediviva, and he named the Columbia River after that vessel, the Columbia Rediviva. His other ship, a smaller vessel, was the Lady Washington. The replica of the Lady Washington has been created by a coastal maritime museum in Grays Harbor, and she sails up the Columbia Gorge periodically.
I've seen her.
You've seen her. That's the Lady Washington, and so
been on her actually.
There you go.
Yeah.
It's a great cruise. I took it one time. They have a motor on it, and the one time I was on, we didn't have any wind. Okay, one of the few days in the Columbia Gorge we didn't have any wind for the sails, so we motored for a while. But it is remarkable.
Yeah.
And that's a replica of one of the vessels that Captain Gray had on his voyage of discovery.
Okay. Well, fascinating. You know what? We're going to take a quick break. When we come back, I want to continue this because this is great stuff. Right. A lot of stuff that, well, I know I don't know, and probably a lot of other people don't know. So we'll be right back. You guys don't go anywhere. We'll be right back on Localite.